delighted to be with you all today and really humbled and honored to have such wonderful speakers before me. From the over 100-year young company of IBM to Twitter, who just turned 10 last August, we'll have two different perspectives. We are living in some extraordinary times, and we are facing some extraordinary challenges that will require extraordinary solutions. And I invite each of us to start to understand the role that social movements can play, and the role we are all going to need to play to ensure positive social impact in the world, in our worlds, and around the world. And so I'm delighted to speak with you today about the role of hashtag activism, and invite you to reconsider hashtag activism as a tool in your toolbox to help amplify your voice and your work. I'm going to talk about movements in general, talk about hashtag activism, and give you examples of roles that hashtag activism can unlock generosity, respond in times of crisis, and also spark movements. But before I start, one of the powers of social media is that it's, at least on Twitter, is that it's live, it's public, and it's conversational. So before we get started, I'd like to invite each of you all to get out your phone. The wireless is there. Go to Twitter, go to my handle, @Barlerin, and pinned to my profile is a poll. And I'd like to hear your vote on how you think the role of hashtags can play in creating positive social change. I also invite you at this time to DM me or reply for feedback on the poll, but also feedback on this talk. So we welcome all of your feedback. But before we get to hashtags, let's begin with a fundamental question. A fundamental question of what are movements? Simply put, movements are about mobilizing people behind a shared purpose. This is something that's gone on long before there was any technology, long before there was radio or TV, or before there was newspapers. Throughout history, social movements, small groups that are loosely connected but united by social purpose, or shared purpose, have had transformational change. The women's suffragist movement and civil rights in the United States, Indian independence, the color revolutions of Eastern Europe, and Arab Spring were all hinged on powerless banding together to challenge the powerful. And today, any one of the billions of people have an opportunity to spark a movement that can grow like wildfire. And I'll show you a few examples. I can't think of a better time to be doing this in New York City, because just down the street from us at UNGA, look at the hashtag global goals. You see conversations going on about movements, conversations, and agendas. And so I think that the formula for successful hashtag activism is marrying together online and offline, having the conversations both together. And that will help ensure a successful movement, successful conversations. Now, when you think about the world of Twitter, you think about people perhaps that are attending events like UNGA, politicians, world leaders, celebrity. What we often don't think about are other voices like Bana. Who is Bana? Bana is a 7-year-old refugee girl who, with help from her mother, began live tweeting her experience under the life of bombardment in Aleppo, Syria. As of March, 13.5 million people in Syria are in need of humanitarian assistance, and Bana provided a window into this conversation globally. She's a perfect example of an everyday global citizen that is using tools, using social media to wake people up to some of the challenges we face in the world. And Bana now has over 360,000 followers on Twitter, which is definitely more than I have, perhaps more than many of you, perhaps more than all of us combined in this room. So just think about the voices of folks like Twitter. Christian, I don't know if you're tweeting yet. You have to be 13, but Kawana was doing it with help from her mother. But it's often a platform for people who have been historically ignored, is the voices on Twitter. Yes, there's also a current president who is also tweeting a lot here in the United States. I will acknowledge that. We are believers in freedom of expression in the United States and on Twitter. But if you spin the globe, this is not unique to Aleppo, Syria. Let's go meet Dr. Carlson in Australia. She's an Aboriginal activist and again talks about the power of Twitter to shine a light on communities that have long gone underrepresented and ignored, but they could tell their stories on Twitter on their own terms and on their own time. So hashtags, hashtag activism. Again, hashtag global goals is a perfect example if you want to study what movements are doing, what conversations are going on. The hashtag itself is simply defined as the pound symbol followed by a word or a phrase. But it is a uniter. It is a way of combining information for a conference, for an event, for a community of shared interests. And people can turn to hashtags to fight for what they believe in. Again, an example of both the marriage of online and offline, the conversations happening in the real world, authentic conversations, but also continuing on offline. Disclaimer, there is a critique of hashtag activism. It's called slacktivism or armchair activism. You say that this is going to be important, and there's lots of eyes being rolled, saying, oh gosh, people are just clicking buttons and replying and liking, and they're just sitting at their computers and nothing's happening. I'll give you a few examples of times where this can be a very powerful drumbeat to put pressure on governments to shine a light on important topics. But again, if it's only online, I don't think it's powerful enough. I think it needs to be the combination of both online voices and offline voices together. To counter slacktivism, you need to marry these two. And the next three examples I'm going to give hopefully will help provide some examples for that. So the first is around unlocking generosity. Ooh. Let's see. Did I hit a wrong button? Sorry. I'll start doing high kicks. No worries. While we're getting the slides back up, unlocking generosity. So show of hands, who in this room has heard of something called Giving Tuesday? Anyone Giving Tuesday? Okay, fantastic. For those of you who have heard of it or have not heard of it, thank you. In 2012, the 92nd Street Y, in partnership with UN Foundation, wanted to do something to counter massive consumption of the holidays. There is, there's Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday, and it's all about consume, consume, consume. I said, what about a day for generosity? In 2012, the first year, it unlocked over $10 million of online donations. If we fast forward 4 years later, $177 million was donated online with this day, with people participating from 96 different countries. And so the first week of December, keep your eyes out for Giving Tuesday and participate. Yet another example of the role that hashtags can play in unlocking generosity. My next example is a hard one because, my gosh, there's a lot of crisis going on. Man-made crisis and natural disaster. In the past few weeks, just front page of the paper this morning, you can see many times the news of a disaster is breaking on Twitter. The bombing, the terrorist attack, but also the tsunami or the earthquake or the hurricane. Just recently in Hurricane Harvey, the 911 lines were inundated so much that no one could get through to them. And people started turning to Twitter. People who were in crisis, people who needed rescuing. Credit to the governmental agencies. They took note and began to adapt. And the hashtag Harvey Rescue took place as a way of communicating all the dispatchers and coordinating people. And the hashtag Harvey SOS was one that they invited people to use, people who needed rescuing from their roofs, people who were disabled and elderly, people with infants. This is a spreadsheet of people who were saved based off the location, using Twitter, using social media. This is not unique to the United States or this current disaster, but people are starting to take note that it's an immediate tool that can be used to help people in times of crisis. And this is one of the first times that social media really came together in partnership with government to help make rescues quicker, more efficient. And so we're excited to see what this will be like in the future. My last example that I'd like to share is one of sparking change. There are many examples of Twitter of sparking change. But for those people who are once again saying, oh gosh, online activism, slacktivism, I'd like to bring you Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter is a really powerful example because it literally transformed an online community to a national movement and a national conversation, a difficult conversation around police brutality against minorities and police killings of unarmed African American citizens. To date, Black Lives Matter has over 40 million tweets, conversations going on online, but has also sparked a movement offline and conversations around the world. So what does this mean? The takeaways. First, I want to go back to that poll and just see where we are, what the results are of the poll. It'll stay open. But right now, thanks for your patience here. All right, 43% believe in this room that hashtags are positive change for movement building, 29% about uniting people globally, 9% about hearing different perspectives, and 19% on learning about issues. So again, there's an opportunity for social media to be live, public, and conversational, using Twitter, using hashtags. This is a space where many causes and movements can be born. And I invite you to have this talk be one that informs you and inspires you to think more about the role social media can play in the conversations you want to have, the positive change you want to make in the world. And I thank you for this opportunity to consider ways to amplify your authentic voice, both for the NGO work you're doing here today and beyond, because we need to all work together to make the positive change happen in the world that we'd like to see. Thank you very much.